Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're once again diving deep into the darkest corners of human behavior and looking at serial killers. And we're starting with the most notorious ones of each year.
He was living among us and in plain sight.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're exploring the most infamous serial killers of every year of the 21st century so far. We'll be examining the year when justice came calling as the criminal was arrested or sentenced for their deeds.
So you killed a greater number of people than the police know?
Oh, yeah. They might have a tenth of it. I'll put it that way.
2000. Javed Iqbal, sentenced March 16th, 2000. In 1999, a newspaper editor and the police station in Lahore, Pakistan received disturbing letters. The writer claimed he had abused and taken the lives of 100 underage young men. They finished with their intention to end their own life in a river. However, the water was searched and nothing was found. A month later, fearing police brutality after claims of being attacked by them previously, Iqbal turned up at a newspaper office and confessed. In 2000, he was sentenced to a brutal execution akin to how Iqbal had treated his victims. However, government officials stated it wouldn't be as bad as the judge had deemed. Before it could be enacted in 2001, Iqbal took his own life. 2001. David Parker Ray, sentenced September 20th, 2001.
Sometimes killers go that extra terrifying mile with their modus operandi. David Parker Ray modified a trailer that would be labeled his toy box. The trailer was soundproofed and filled with instruments for his violence.
He called it the Den of Satan.
He would abduct women, abuse them for months in the trailer, and presumably eventually end their lives, sometimes with accomplices, one of them being his girlfriend, Cynthia Hendy. In 1999, a woman managed to escape the toy box after 3 days and get help from a neighbor.
That's what I went through. And these families deserve to have these people to know what happened.
The police immediately arrested Ray and Hendy. On a plea deal, Ray was sentenced to 224 years in jail, while Hendy, who testified against her former partner, got 36 years. It's unknown how many women Ray killed, but some estimates are upwards of 60.
He claimed to have abducted 40 women from across the U.S. Since no bodies were ever found, he was never charged, and he never will be. Ray died in prison in 2002 by heart attack.
2002. Terry Rasmussen, arrested November 2002. Terry Rasmussen earned the moniker Chameleon Killer, not because he blended in, but because he went by a number of different aliases.
Bob Evans was an alias, along with Curtis Mayo Kimball, Gordon Jensen, Jerry Markerman, or Lawrence William Vanner. They were all used by this man, Terry Rasmussen, a divorced father of 4 from the Southwest.
While Rasmussen has only been convicted of 1 murder, experts believe that he committed at least 5. Many peg him as the man behind New Hampshire's Bear Brook murders of the late 1970s, which encompassed the death of 4 girls, including Rasmussen's daughter.
He just didn't disappear off the face of the earth without a name or an identity.
He died before he could be tried for their deaths. He is also thought to have slain his girlfriend, Denise Bowden, in 1981. Finally, he did away with his wife, Eunsun Jun, in 2002, and it was for this crime that he was finally arrested and imprisoned. He died in High Desert State Prison in 2010.
Curtis Kimball.
Curtis Kimball. Or Gerald what's his
Mockerman?
Mockerman, right.
Ring a bell?
No.
2003. Gary Ridgway, sentenced December 18th, 2003.
When it comes to confirmed killings, Gary Ridgway is the second most prolific killer in American history, behind the deceased Samuel Little.
In Seattle today, a man called the Green River Killer has finally confessed to murdering 48 women and girls.
Ridgway's known crimes occurred throughout much of the 80s and 90s, but they may have also stretched into the early 2000s. In that time, Ridgway killed a confirmed 49 people, but the true number may stretch past 90. He was given the nickname the Green River Killer, as some of his early victims were found in Washington's Green River.
Ridgway, a suspect for nearly 20 years, was arrested in 2001 after DNA testing matched him to the crimes.
Like the Golden State Killer, Ridgway was eventually caught with the help of DNA testing and sentenced to life in prison. As of 2023, he is 74 years old and confined to Washington State Penitentiary.
Gary Ridgway will spend the rest of his life in prison.
2004, Larm Price, sentenced February 11th, 2004. In the wake of September 11th, 2001, Price's paranoia spiraled out of control. With a long criminal history and mental health issues, he believed he was being followed and had a tracking device in his hand. In 2003, Price began his spree. Altogether, he took the lives of 4 people as revenge against those who enacted the 2001 attack. However, only one of his victims was of Middle Eastern descent. Price walked into a police station and told them a person called Dog had been responsible. The officers, heavily suspecting Price, met with him the next day, and he confessed to his crimes. In 2004, he was sentenced to 150 years in jail without parole. 2005, Dennis Rader, arrested February 25th, 2005.
Having named himself BTK after his modus operandi, for 20 years, Rader was a massive thorn in the side of the police in Kansas.
When BTK came forward, everybody's life changed. He would see a woman walking and he would say, "She's next."
Like the infamous Jack the Ripper, he sent mocking letters to the cops and media. But in person, Rader seemed nice. He had a loving family and was the president of his local church congregation. His first victims were the Otero family in 1974, and his 10th and last victim was Dolores Davis in 1991. Then he dropped off the map, but in 2004 he began taunting them once again. However, he got sloppy with a floppy disk, and it was traced to his church.
He asks the police in one of the communications, "What if I were to give you a floppy disk with more details of the killings? Could you identify me?"
In 2005, Rader pleaded guilty and got 10 consecutive life sentences.
2006, Charles Cullen, sentenced March 2nd, 2006.
This is a frightening serial killer and one of the most prolific in American history. Charles Cullen worked as a nurse in various New Jersey hospitals throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s.
He was able to move from hospital to hospital without so much as a bad reference.
And in that time, he killed multiple patients by overdosing them on drugs. His true number of victims is unknown. 29 have been confirmed, but he has personally confessed to killing 40. But even that number may be low. Investigators believe that Cullen was responsible for hundreds of deaths.
We'll never know how many people Charlie Cullen killed.
It was noticed that many patients were dying under Cullen's care, but a national shortage of nurses ensured that he kept finding work. He was finally arrested in December of 2003 and has since been given 18 life sentences.
What do you want me to tell you?
Names.
I can't remember all the names.
2007, Peter Tobin, sentenced May 4th, 2007.
As police investigated Angelica's murder in 2006, they quickly realized that it wasn't carried out by a first-time murderer.
In 2006, Pat McLaughlin was a maintenance worker at a church in Glasgow, Scotland. However, that wasn't his real name. Tobin had used the alias to hide his criminal history of assaulting 2 teenagers and spending 10 years in jail. After Angelica Kluk's body was found at the church, Tobin's identity was discovered and he was arrested for her murder.
Mr. Tobin is considered a potential risk to members of the public. Any person who sees this man is advised not to approach him.
In 2007, he was found guilty and sentenced to life with a minimum of 21 years. In 2007 and 2008, the remains of 2 teenagers, Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol, respectively, were found at former homes Tobin lived in. Both had been missing since 1991. Tobin was found guilty of both murders, having his life minimum sentence increased to a whole life order in 2009.
No, he's never going to talk. He won't talk about anything, any of his other crimes. But we know that during that period of time, Peter Tobin was in this area.
2008, Ronald Dominique, sentenced September 23rd, 2008.
We're doing everything we can to catch this person responsible and still ending up with dead bodies.
From the late 90s into the 2000s, Louisiana had been experiencing a spike in murders and assaults of men and boys, often black and sometimes gay, each showing a similar cause of death. This led to the killer being named the Bayou Strangler, In 2006, the police arrested Dominique after one man told them he'd escaped a dangerous situation from him.
I pulled him out of the passenger side. I hurry up and I grabbed him, pushed him in the ditch, and then took off.
While he denied the allegations, Dominique gave them a blood sample. On the surface, he didn't look like a killer, as he was short and had heart issues. Yet the DNA sample came back positive for several cases, causing Dominique to confess to 23 murders. In 2008, due to a plea bargain, Dominique was sentenced to 8 life imprisonment terms without parole.
Early the next morning, Ronald Dominique confessed to 23 murders.
2009, Kang Ho-soon, sentenced April 22, 2009. From 2006 to 2008, women living in Seoul, South Korea had to live in fear. An unknown man was picking them up from various places, assaulting them, and then taking their lives. The investigation into it led police to Kang in 2009. During the interrogation, he confessed to killing 8 women. However, in 2005, Kang had escaped a house fire that had taken the lives of his wife and his mother-in-law. While he denied causing the fatal arson, he was found guilty of the crime, totaling his victim number to 10 women. In 2009, Kang was sentenced to execution. However, an informal moratorium in South Korea has halted capital punishment since 1997.
말해.
2010, Lonnie David Franklin Jr., arrested July 7th, 2010.
And you were accused of not caring because they were black women.
Yes, there were a few activists that were there accusing us of doing nothing. That was not true.
Shepard says the LAPD didn't have the manpower nor the technology at the time to solve the multiple murders.
Active initially in the 1980s, the Grim Sleeper earned his moniker from the extended break that he took between 1988 and the early 2000s. Real name, Lonnie Franklin Jr., the Sleeper took his first confirmed victim in 1984. He then claimed a further 9 lives, with his final murder occurring on September 11th, 1988.
Look how many years it was. I mean, it was a 30-year gap almost before they eventually caught somebody. 30 years to catch a black person that killed another black person. 30 years. Why is that? Because they weren't really looking.
He did attack a 30-year-old woman the following November, but she survived. Perhaps fearing the repercussions of her survival, the Sleeper lay dormant for over a decade. His next victim likely being 43-year-old Georgia Mae Thomas on December 28, 2000. It wasn't until the advent of DNA testing that Franklin was considered a suspect, and he was finally arrested in 2010, 26 years after taking his first victim.
And I'm fairly certain that Lonnie Franklin was going to take to the grave all of the information regarding the unprosecuted, unknown victims that we were never able to put together.
2011, Anthony Sowell, sentenced August 12, 2011.
Relatives of victims complained that their missing persons report weren't taken seriously by police. Even after one victim identified Sowell, he was released from jail only to kill more women.
In 1990, shortly after being discharged from the U.S. Army, Sowell was sentenced for assaulting a woman. He was released in 2005, and years later began the killing spree that would get him the moniker of the Cleveland Strangler. In 2009, after one victim survived and informed the police of her assault, the cops arrived at his Cleveland, Ohio home.
He knew how to coax them. He knew how to get next to them. He knew how to make them feel comfortable. And he knew at what time to approach them.
There, they found the remains of 11 women and arrested Sowell. After several delays, the trial got underway in 2011. Sowell was found guilty of the 11 murders, as well as a litany of other crimes. The judge agreed with the jury's recommendation and sentenced Sowell to capital punishment. However, he passed away naturally in 2021.
Sean was unconscious and taken to the hospital with Sowell at her side. He dropped her off and left without ever being questioned by the police.
2012, Israel Keys, arrested March 13th, 2012.
What's most terrifying for the police and the public is a killer with no MO. But to make things worse, how about one who was also trained by the U.S. Army? This was the case of Israel Keys.
I would let them come to me. Just remote area. Come go to a remote area that's not anywhere near where you live, that other people go to as well.
Across the country, Keyes had set up kill kits, which gave him access to equipment wherever he decided to attack someone. After he killed 18-year-old Samantha Koenig, the FBI was able to track his bank account use and make an arrest following the demand for a ransom.
Police arrested 34-year-old Israel Keyes 4,000 miles away in Texas.
Once he was in custody, however, it was discovered that Keyes was responsible for the murder of multiple victims.
We did spend a fair amount of time talking about his crimes and his offenses as well, and those times were definitely very chilling to hear him talk about what he's done.
Before he faced trial in 2012, Keyes took his own life, and taking with him information that might have been used to solve other crimes. 2013, William Clyde Gibson, sentenced November 26, 2013.
The first woman you killed was Karen Hodella, a 44-year-old woman who you had never met. Why did you kill her? Just felt like it.
During his time in the U.S. Army, Gibson developed substance use issues, leading to being dishonorably discharged. From there, he had stints in jail for several crimes, including theft and assault. This led to many accusations of mental illness, but nothing that was officially confirmed by professionals. In 2012, after Gibson's mother died, he snapped. Within a few weeks, he had assaulted and murdered 2 women. One of his victims was his mom's friend, whose body was discovered in Gibson's home.
75-year-old Christine Whitus was found strangled in his home, and police connected Gibson to the cold case death of 45-year-old Karen Hodella shortly after.
He confessed to both murders to the cops, plus another he'd done in 2002. In 2013, the jury took less than 20 minutes to find Gibson guilty of 1 murder. Altogether, he received 2 death sentences and 65 years in jail.
Judge Orth says the serial killer's lack of remorse played a part in her verdict. She mentioned that Gibson's tattoo that says death row ×3 is an indication of his feelings toward his crime.
2014, Samuel Little, sentenced September 25th, 2014. In 2019, the FBI confirmed that they'd identified Samuel Little as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. After being convicted for slaying 3 people in 2014, the unsettling extent of his crimes began to leak out over the next few years. By 2018, Little had confessed to killing 93 women across the country.
It's disturbing to listen to, but investigators want to hear it all and more. 79-year-old Samuel Little has confessed to 93 murders. That's more than were committed by Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer combined.
Little provided the FBI with details on many of the cases from 1970 to 2005, and even drew the victims from memory to prove he was telling the truth.
These are the portraits drawn by Samuel Little himself. They're the women he claims to have killed. They're so accurate that family members have recognized lost loved ones from them.
Before he passed away in 2020, more than 60 of Little's confessions across at least 14 states had been confirmed by the authorities. 2015, Mikhail Popkov, sentenced January 14th, 2015.
За совершение 22 убийств и 2 покушений на убийство женщин в январе 2015 года Иркутским областным судом Попков уже был осужден к пожизненному лишению свободы.
Starting in 1992 and lasting nearly 2 decades, the Russian city of Angarsk and the surrounding area was plagued by a killer known as the Werewolf, or the Angarsk Maniac. Mainly targeting women, the criminal had taken many lives, including a police officer. During an investigation at one of the crime scenes, there were tracks from a vehicle typically used by cops. In 2012, when current and former officers were DNA tested, Popkov's matched, who was now working as a security guard after leaving the force. In 2015, he was sentenced to life for 22 murders. Over the years since, Popkov has confessed to taking the lives of as many as 86 people, earning him further life sentences and years to his punishment.
He offered rides to women, sometimes in his police car while he was off duty. Still, his crime spree first went unnoticed.
2016, Bradley Robert Edwards, arrested December 22, 2016. Between 1996 and 1997, 3 women went missing from Claremont, a suburb in Western Australia. 2 were later found dead.
The night Sarah Spears vanished from Claremont in January 1996 was the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in WA's history.
These circumstances made police suspect a serial killer was responsible.
But finding that killer would require one of the largest, most expensive investigations in Australian history. Over the following years, numerous suspects were interrogated, watched, and eventually ruled out.
Lance Williams was a prime suspect in the eyes of the police. They were desperate for somebody to look at for these crimes, and he definitely put his head up over the parapet.
Then, a study of fibers from the crime scenes revealed two important facts: what the murderer had been wearing and what kind of car he drove. Both implicated Bradley Robert Edwards. His DNA also turned out to match samples found under one of the victim's fingernails.
The police had caught up with him because really science had caught up with him. It was the DNA that got police to Bradley Robert Edwards' door, and it was the DNA that got him into court in 2019 for the trial.
Edwards was arrested and charged with murder in 2016 and is currently serving a life sentence in prison. 2017, Todd Kohlhepp, sentenced May 26, 2017.
And that's what happens as family member after family member gets up to speak. Todd shows no emotion, even though many in the courtroom are in tears.
In 1987, as a teenager, Kohlhepp was sentenced to jail for kidnap and assault. Released in 2001, he later became a realtor. In 2016, Kayla Brown and Charles David Carver vanished from one of Kohlhepp's properties. A couple of months later, she was found chained up in a storage container based at the location. Brown told police that Kohlhepp had murdered Carver, assaulted her, and shown her the graves of other victims.
I kind of got to see it from the beginning, and I kind of got to see it as it was coming to an end.
The police soon found two bodies of a married couple who'd gone missing in 2015. When Kohlhepp was arrested, he confessed to the 3 murders plus the 2003 killings of 4 people in a motorbike shop. In 2017, a plea bargain got him 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
You've got multiple murders, shallow graves, a huge mysterious property, a serial killer who has this larger-than-life personality.
2018, Darren Dion Vann, sentenced May 25th, 2018.
He preyed on individuals that might be less likely to be reported missing.
In 2013, former U.S. Marine Vann was released from jail after serving 4 years for assault. The next year, the body of Africa Hardy was discovered in Hammond, Indiana. The investigation led officials to Vann. During the interrogation, he confessed to Hardy's murder, but also to many others.
They located a body, but it wasn't the right one. Well, it wasn't one of mine.
For several years, a reporter and later a coroner had warned police about a possible serial killer in Gary, Indiana, with up to 18 victims, but their concerns were dismissed. Vann led police to abandoned houses where he slashed 7 of his victims, mostly in the city of Gary. In 2018, as part of a plea deal, Vann was sentenced to 7 concurrent life sentences without parole.
Investigators continue to question Vann and plan to use cadaver dogs to search abandoned buildings for other possible victims.
2019, Robert Hayes, arrested September 15th, 2019. Nicknamed Squeaky and with a friendly reputation, Hayes seemed like a good person. However, behind the scenes, he was anything but. From late 2005 to 2006, the bodies of 3 sex workers were found in Daytona Beach, Florida. Hayes was investigated for being the Daytona Beach killer. However, he was dismissed as the criminal profile called for a white man.
We conducted many operations to try to catch him. We knew he had his DNA, so we knew sooner or later he was going to stub his toe and we were going to get him.
In 2007, a similar murder happened. Then another in 2016, which matched DNA evidence from the Daytona Beach slayings. The DNA was run through an ancestry genetic database, leading to a match for Hayes. In 2019, he was arrested. In 2022, Hayes was sentenced for the Daytona murders to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. He's currently awaiting trial for the 2016 murder.
Detectives say DNA links Hayes to the 2016 murder. Now they say he's connected to at least 3 other murders in Daytona Beach between 2005 and 2006.
2020, Joseph James D'Angelo, sentenced August 21st, 2020. Police officers are meant to be honorable and find justice for victims, not cause a wake of destruction like Joseph James D'Angelo.
For decades, Joseph James D'Angelo was America's most wanted man, the Golden State Killer.
In 1976, he began his spree of assaults and burglaries in Sacramento, California.
In the space of 3 years, he had committed 50 attacks. By 1978, D'Angelo progressed by slaying Brian and Katie Maggiore. He morphed into the original Night Stalker and later the Golden State Killer before the crime stopped in 1986. Then, in 2018, the police used genetic genealogy from the DNA found at D'Angelo's crimes to trace it back to him.
The search takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. Within a day, I had the list of potential relatives to the Golden State Killer.
In 2020, amongst several charges, he pled guilty to 13 murders as part of a deal to avoid capital punishment and got a life sentence.
But tonight, the Golden State Killer muttering this apology to his victims.
And I'm really sorry.
Moments later, Joe D'Angelo was sentenced to life without parole.
2021, Francois Vero. Confession, September 29, 2021. From 1986 to 1994, at least 3 females were assaulted and murdered in Paris, France by the same assailant. Nicknamed the Pockmarked Man due to acne scars, the police were stumped for decades. However, during the investigation and witness statements, they realized the killer was an officer. Armed with DNA from the 1987 murder and modern technology, the cops summoned current and former officers to a test in 2021. Shortly after getting the request, Vero vanished. He'd worked as an officer in Paris for years before retiring in 2019, even appearing on a national game show. Vero took his own life. As well as his DNA matching, he left a letter to his wife that confessed to committing the crimes before stopping in 1997. 2022, Juan David Ortiz, sentenced December 7th, 2022.
The person arrested and charged in the killings that left 4 dead, an individual nobody expected, a Border Patrol agent.
For 10 years, U.S. Navy veteran Ortiz had an impeccable record as a member of the United States Border Patrol in Texas. In 2018, Erica Pena ran to a state trooper and told them she'd escaped from Ortiz's vehicle. He was soon connected to the murder of 4 women within 2 weeks, all of whom were sex workers. Ortiz ran from the police after he was approached. However, he was soon found hiding in a parking lot and was arrested.
It's like, you know, these people, they're not good people. So I convinced myself of that.
The police believe Ortiz attempted to not be taken alive. The border agent confessed to the 4 murders during the interrogation. However, Ortiz still pleaded not guilty. In 2022, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in jail without parole.
Provost assured the Border Patrol maintains high hiring standards and referred to the suspects as rogue agents. Ortiz was placed under indefinite suspension without pay.
2023, Rex Heuermann, arrested July 14, 2023. One of the most infamous cold cases of our time was the Gilgo Beach killings. Dating back to 1996, a man did away with at least 10 people and dumped their remains in the Gilgo Beach area of Long Island.
Now, there were 10 sets of remains, all told, found along that area of Gilgo Beach. It had long been a dumping ground for bodies.
In December 2010, the remains of 4 women were found, and they were dubbed the Gilgo 4. Just a few months later, investigators found 6 more sets of remains, bringing the body count to 10. The case was extensively studied until July 2023, when a Manhattan architect named Rex Heuermann was arrested and charged with killing 3 of the Gilgo 4.
He's been charged in the deaths of 3 women, and he is the prime suspect in the death of a 4th. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was found right with the other 3.
And so it seems that 27 years after the death of the first victim, the mystery of the Gilgo Beach killings may have been solved.
It's not clear that Heuermann's going to be linked to all 10 sets of human remains, but it's a good bet, Kira, that prosecutors are going to move forward, charging him with the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes.
2024, Radzik Tagirov, sentenced March 21st, 2024.
То есть ты готов рассказывать? Ты понимаешь, что это ПЖ?
From 2011 to 2012, the Volga Maniac was taking the lives of elderly women who lived in low-cost apartment buildings within and around the Volga and Ural districts of Russia. The assailant pretended to be a utility or social services worker to gain access to their homes. Then they fatally attacked and robbed the victims.
Иногда звали, иногда напрашивался, представлялся сотрудником.
In 2020, after years of false leads, DNA evidence and shoe print analysis led the police to Tagirov, who had a criminal history of theft. After initially admitting to the crimes, he later withdrew his statement and blamed being under stress during the confession. In 2024, Tagirov was found guilty of 31 murders, several attempts, and 34 assaults, earning him life imprisonment.
Почему именно вы душили, выбрали этот способ убийства?
What was the biggest serial killer story the year you were born?
Some killers face a different kind of justice behind bars. Yep, these upcoming serial killers met their end not in the court, but in prison.
Many saying that today, 30 years after he was sentenced, Donald Harvey was judged.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're taking a look at the serial killers who were brought to justice by murder in prison.
This story of Pickton is really a story of egregious police errors and public indifference.
Thor Nis Christensen.
Thor Christensen terrified a town.
No conscience whatsoever. Zero.
Born in Denmark, Thor Nis Christensen was brought to the U.S. by his parents at the age of 5. Although a bright student in high school, Christensen later lost interest in his studies and dropped out to work at a gas station. Around this time, he began harboring despicable thoughts, which he then made a reality after stealing a pistol from a friend. He was responsible for the deaths of 4 women, but his murderous spree came to an end when his intended 5th victim survived the ordeal and led the police to him months later.
This guy thinks what he did was all right.
While serving a life sentence at Folsom State Prison, Christensen was wounded in the exercise yard by an unidentified prisoner and later succumbed to his injuries. Roger Kibbe. Dubbed the I-5 Strangler, Roger Kibbe was responsible for the assault and deaths of at least 8 women. His killing spree mostly occurred around Sacramento, California between 1977 and 1987, and he would hunt for his victims along the interstate highway, hence the nickname. He was eventually arrested in 1988 and received an initial prison sentence of 25 years to life.
For each victim, Kibbe responded in a hoarse, raspy voice saying, "Guilty, guilty," 6 times.
In the following years, more life sentences were added to this as further evidence of his other murders was discovered. On February 28, 2021, while at the Mule Creek State Prison in California, the I-5 Strangler was strangled to death by his cellmate, Jason Boudreaux, who reportedly did it in retribution for his crimes.
Shock from victims' families tonight, guys. Those who were directly impacted by Roger Kibbe and his serial slayings. But some of these families tonight are saying his death comes 35 years too late.
Robert Pickton.
She was told another inmate with a history of assaults had been in segregation, but was released into Pickton's unit, and that's where the serial killer was speared in the head.
One of the most notorious serial killers in Canadian history, Robert Pickton was convicted of murdering 6 people, although he was charged with 21 and later confessed to 49. He mostly targeted sex workers in downtown Vancouver, picking them up and taking them to his pig farm, where he would kill and dispose of them.
I would wake up in the middle of the night, with a certain face or picture of a girl that I hadn't seen for a while. Or then somebody, the next day would mention to me that we haven't seen so-and-so for a while.
He was sentenced to life in prison and served his time in Quebec's Port Cartier institution. On May 19, 2024, Pickton was reportedly stabbed in the head with a broken broom handle by prisoner Martin Charret. He was rushed to the hospital and put on life support, but he died of his injuries 12 days later.
While Pickton's death may provide peace for some, it also leaves questions unanswered. Were others involved in the murders? Who else did he kill?
Daniel Camargo Barbosa. Born in Colombia in 1930, Daniel Camargo Barbosa had a pretty troubling childhood. Prevented from furthering his education by financial constraints, Barbosa eventually fell into a life of crime. He began with petty thefts before escalating into abducting, assaulting, and murdering young girls. Barbosa first went to prison in Colombia, where it is believed that he claimed the lives of more than 80 girls. He escaped from prison and fled to Ecuador, where he continued his despicable actions, later owning up to 72 murders in the country. Barbosa was incarcerated for 16 years, but his sentence was cut short just 5 years in when he was killed by another inmate, who happened to be one of his victim's nephews. Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega. Dubbed El Mataviejas, which translates to the Old Lady Killer in English, Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega rained terror on elderly women in Cantabria. an autonomous community in Spain. In the span of just 8 months, Rodriguez Vega wormed his way into the hearts and homes of several women in the area and took the lives of at least 16 of them. Upon his arrest, Rodriguez Vega confessed to the crimes, but later recanted his confession during his trial. Regardless, he was found guilty and sentenced to 440 years in prison. After serving only a fraction of his sentence, Rodriguez Vega met his end at the hands of 2 inmates at his prison in Salamanca, who brutally attacked him in the common area. Léopold Zion. The crimes of Léopold Zion are pretty tragic, not only because they involve the deaths of 4 people and the assault of many others, but because a large number of them could have been prevented. Zion had been convicted twice of crimes involving assault, but in both cases, he was released early by a parole board. He later succeeded in cutting short the lives of 4 young boys before he was arrested again, this time for good. Zion was convicted of just 1 murder and received the death penalty, although this was later commuted to a life sentence. He was attacked and killed in prison by a fellow inmate, who was acquitted of the crime on the basis of insanity. Leroy Martin. Born and raised in Gaffney, South Carolina, Leroy Martin lived a seemingly normal life. He worked in a textile mill and had a wife and 3 children. Behind that facade, though, was a maniac who rained terror on women in the area and was responsible for the deaths of 4 people.
And I was getting a little eerie feeling as we got deeper into the woods, and finally one of the deputies said, "Here she is," and she was covered up with some brush.
After placing 2 calls himself to a newspaper editor, Martin was spotted close to a crime scene by 2 local residents and was later arrested by police.
You tell the sheriff his boys better catch me real soon or I'm gonna take me another one.
Why don't you just turn yourself in?
Nah, y'all gonna have to hunt me down and shoot me dead like the dog I am.
He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, but only served about 4 years before he was put out of his misery by another inmate at the Central Correctional Institution in South Carolina.
Part of him wanted to be caught. I think another part of him enjoyed the publicity. He would get up every morning and go down to a local cafe and get copies of all the papers and read and talk about the strangler.
Donald Harvey. While working as a hospital orderly in Ohio and Kentucky, Donald Harvey was responsible for the deaths of a self-proclaimed 87 people.
He was quite bizarre, and on certain levels raised some doubts as to whether or not this guy was reciting some sort of fantasy.
Harvey employed several methods in what he deemed as a mercy killing of his patients, including the use of poisons, suffocation, and withholding essential medications.
They do narrow the list to 10 possible victims. All died of illnesses that could be a cover for poisons like arsenic, a substance found in large quantities at Harvey's apartment.
He pleaded guilty to 37 murders to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. But when you describe yourself as an angel of death, chances are you're bound to get a taste of your own medicine at some point. This came in the form of James Elliott, a fellow inmate at the Toledo Correctional Institution in Ohio, who descended upon Harvey, being familiar with his crimes.
He placed himself in that position. I really don't have much compassion for him. He's, I said back then, and I'd say today, if he ever had gotten out, he would have continued to kill people.
Albert DeSalvo.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
1960s Boston, Massachusetts was terrorized by 2 criminals. One dubbed the Boston Strangler, who killed 13 women, and the Green Man, who broke into women's homes and assaulted them.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
As police launched an investigation into the Green Man's activities, they were pointed towards Albert DeSalvo, whom they arrested and charged with the crimes. While in custody, DeSalvo confessed to also being the Boston Strangler, but due to a lack of physical evidence, he was only tried for the Green Man allegations. DeSalvo was serving a life sentence when he died after being wounded by another inmate in the prison infirmary. Decades later, DNA evidence obtained from one of the victims would prove that DeSalvo was, in fact, the Boston Strangler.
It would appear to definitively determine, in fact, that Albert DeSalvo was the killer of Mary Sullivan.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for killing more than a dozen people. The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
One of the most infamous serial killers to ever walk the earth. Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for the deaths of 17 young men. His spree came to an end in July 1991 when an intended victim escaped from Dahmer's apartment and led the police back to him. He pleaded guilty to all the charges leveled against him and received 15 consecutive life sentences in Wisconsin and an additional one in Ohio. In prison, Dahmer was reportedly unremorseful for his crimes, which reportedly infuriated his fellow inmate Christopher Scarver, resulting in an attack in the prison gym that left Dahmer dead.
To many, including Dahmer's own attorney, it comes as little surprise.
I wasn't shocked because I thought that Jeffrey Dahmer would end up this way.
Scarver also killed Jesse Anderson, another convicted murderer, who just happened to be in the gym at the same time.
At his first court appearance, Scarver entered the courtroom singing.
Rain or shine, sharing your dreams.
Do you feel as though justice was served appropriately in these situations?
I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done.
Even the most methodical killers can make a fatal error. Here are 20 mistakes that got serial killers caught.
Clearly not that familiar with computer technology, he handed the police a golden opportunity.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at 20 major blunders that famous serial killers made that ended up getting them caught.
Once again, it was a traffic violation that brought him down.
Subletting his apartment, John Christie.
Okay, just dump it here. Really smells bad in here. Soon get it cleaned up.
This British serial killer has to be one of the dumbest murderers ever. Christie killed at least 8 people inside his Notting Hill flat, then hid their bodies in various spots around the house. And then this guy, knowing full well that there were human corpses inside the walls, illegally subletted his flat to an unsuspecting couple. The landlord found the couple living there instead of Christie and kicked them out, then allowed another tenant to use Christie's vacant kitchen while he found another permanent renter. This tenant, Beresford Brown, was installing a radio when he found a hidden alcove in the kitchen. Inside the alcove were 3 corpses, and the rest is history.
You're Christie. John Reginald Christie. I should have to take you into custody. Come along.
Involving the brother-in-law, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Described by the trial judge as, quote, 2 sadistic killers of the utmost depravity, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley murdered 5 people in the early 1960s. These are known as the Moors murders, as the couple would dump their bodies on Saddleworth Moor. And then they decided to involve Hindley's brother-in-law, David Smith. Brady had become close to Smith and saw him as a potential accomplice, so he invited Smith to witness the murder of Edward Evans. Horrified but pretending to go along, Smith helped move Evans' body to a spare bedroom and promised to return in the morning so they could take it to the moor. Instead, he contacted the police, who quickly found Evans' body, keeping a burial plot map. Robert Hansen.
Bob, we found this at your house. Can you tell me what it is?
I haven't seen this. What is this?
It's a flight chart.
I'm sure you've seen hundreds of them.
Right, and what are all these little markings on it, these X's?
Those are places where I hunt.
But Bob, why is this one and this one where these 2 girls' bodies were found and these 2?
This butcher was known for abducting victims and then releasing them into the Alaskan bush, where he would hunt them for sport. It's believed that he killed up to 37 people in this manner. In June of 1983, potential victim Cindy Paulson escaped from Hansen and contacted the police. While they didn't believe her story at first, owing to Hansen's upstanding reputation and meek personality, they eventually obtained a search warrant. Inside his house was a trove of evidence, including jewelry and, most importantly, a map with 37 little X marks. These marks corresponded perfectly with where bodies had previously been found. Confronted with the evidence, Hansen quickly folded and spent the rest of his life in prison.
You're saying, no way, those are just places where I hunted.
Oh, I believe they were, Bob. Places where you've hunted.
Yep.
Fleeing an accident, Eileen Warnos.
I'm gonna call an ambulance.
No, see, that's okay. See, we don't have any insurance. We'd just rather, deal with this ourselves.
The rare female serial killer, Eileen Warnos murdered a total of 7 men, but her spree did not last long owing to some very sloppy mistakes. The worst of all occurred on July 4th, 1990, when Warnos and her girlfriend, Tyra Moore, got into an accident while driving her victim's car. They quickly fled the scene, prompting an eyewitness to describe their physical details to the police. They also combed the car for fingerprints. As Warnos had a criminal record in Florida, her prints were already in the system, and police quickly got a match. With it, Warnos was placed inside the vehicle belonging to a missing man. It proved to be her downfall, and she was arrested 6 months later.
Go, Sylvie, now.
No, I want to drive.
Sylvie, that girl belongs to a dead man, all right?
Robbing a supermarket. Danny Rolling.
The wheels of justice may turn slow, but they do turn. You don't ask of justice. It asks of you.
Known as the Gainesville Ripper, Danny Rolling murdered a total of 8 people, although he's known primarily for the Gainesville killings of August 1990. And he was ultimately arrested not for the murders, but for robbing a local supermarket. In fact, Rolling had a long history of committing robberies, with the habit going back to his teenage years. And when he was arrested, investigators found various guns and tools in his possession. While Rolling was in jail for the robbery, investigators successfully matched tools and items found at the Gainesville crime scenes to the tools in his possession, and the collected DNA matched his own. And with that, a bungled robbery took down one of Florida's most notorious killers.
His appetite couldn't be sated until such time as he began to commit the murders.
Withdrawing a victim's money with her own card, Israel Keys.
Back when I was smart, I would let them come to me.
On February 2, 2012, Israel Keys killed his final victim, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig. Keys staged Koenig's body to make it look like she was alive and made a ransom photo, demanding $30,000 from her family. The money was paid, and Keys, not needing it anymore, disposed of Koenig's body in a lake. But the money had been deposited into Koenig's account, and Keys used her card to withdraw the money at numerous ATMs throughout the southwestern U.S. This was obviously suspicious, as Koenig had been the victim of a kidnapping and was now missing. Police used ATM security footage to identify Keys' vehicle, and it was eventually found and pulled over. Inside the vehicle was Koenig's card, and Keys was arrested.
He talked about the rush that he got out of it, the adrenaline and kind of the high from doing it, and I think unfortunately, I think he enjoyed what he was doing.
Abandoning a stolen car, Richard Ramirez.
Fortunately for us, there was a young man that lived in the neighborhood that was working on a bike. He saw the car drive up, driving kind of slow, looking around, and he thought it was funny, and then he saw it leave again.
Most serial killers get caught eventually, and a surprising amount go down thanks to abandoned vehicles. In the mid-1980s, the Night Stalker was using a stolen orange Toyota to drive around Los Angeles, and on the night of August 24, 1985, he sped away from a prospective house after being caught prowling. The house's occupant, James Romero, took note of the car and reported it to the police. This car was later found abandoned in Koreatown, and police were able to lift a fingerprint from the mirror. It was matched to one Richard Ramirez, who had a long rap sheet stemming from other crimes. He was later found and arrested, bringing down the infamous Night Stalker of LA.
He says, San Francisco came up with the name Richard Ramirez. If we had a name, we could match that to that single print off the rearview mirror of that car used down in Orange County.
Offering someone a job, John Wayne Gacy.
Who are they?
Cops.
Cops, why?
I'm a very important man.
Despite being one of the most famous and prolific serial killers in American history, John Wayne Gacy went down thanks to a bizarrely ordinary, almost anticlimactic mistake. On the night of December 11th, 1978, Gacy was in Neeson Pharmacy talking to the owner about remodeling the store. There, he met his final victim, Robert Pickton, and offered him a job at his construction business. Later that night, Pickton told his mother that he was going to meet, quote, some contractor. When he failed to return, Pickton's mother filed a missing persons report. During the investigation, the store's owner claimed that this contractor was John Wayne Gacy. Police then received a search warrant for Gacy's house, where they ultimately found his victims buried in the crawl space.
John, I'm sorry to disturb you, but that hideous stench coming from under your house is getting worse.
It's moisture buildup in my crawl space. I'm taking care of it, I promise.
Writing a letter to his victim's mother, Albert Fish.
My dear Mrs. Budd.
Well, what's it say, Edward?
As it dates back to the 1920s, no one really knows how many people Albert Fish killed, his body count ranging from as low as 3 to as high as 100. Either way, his spree ended when he wrote a sick and taunting letter to the mother of his victim, Grace Budd. Budd gave this letter to the police, and they saw that the envelope was stamped with an emblem representing the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. There, they found a janitor who took some stationery back to his boarding house, but had left it there after moving out. They went to the boarding house, found Fish, and apprehended him after he attacked them with a razor.
Is it about those silly letters?
Yes, that's part of it. Let's take a drive and we'll have a little chat.
Keeping Polaroids and body parts in the apartment, Jeffrey Dahmer.
I gotta say, that smell is worse than ever.
Is it? Well, you know, I had that meat that went bad. That little freezer I got.
There's probably nothing a serial killer fears more than letting a prospective victim escape their grasp. After 17 kills, that's exactly what brought down Jeffrey Dahmer. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer took Tracy Edwards back to his apartment, intending to kill him. However, Edwards overpowered Dahmer and escaped before flagging down 2 police officers. They escorted Edwards back to the apartment and looked around, entering Dahmer's bedroom. There, one of the officers opened a drawer and found numerous Polaroids depicting Dahmer's victims. They quickly cuffed Dahmer and soon discovered some grisly remains in the fridge. Dahmer was quick to give up and later waived his right to a lawyer, readily and openly admitting his heinous crimes.
What I did, I should be dead.
Parking ticket, David Berkowitz. One of the scariest modus operandi of serial killers is when they select victims randomly, as did David Berkowitz, aka the Son of Sam. Beginning his deadly spree in 1975, Berkowitz took the lives of 6 people and injured 11.
Spreading panic across the city that never sleeps.
In 1977, Cecilia Davis was walking near one of Berkowitz's crime scenes when she spotted a man next to a car. Something told her to run, so she did, hearing shots as she sprinted away. Davis eventually told the police about the incident and that the vehicle the man was using had a parking ticket. After checking the details, the cops found Berkowitz, discovered weapons in his car, and arrested him.
And sure enough, there were 4 summonses given out. One of them to a David Berkowitz.
In 1978, he was sentenced to 25 years to life for each murder. Missing license plate, Joel Rifkin. In 1994, Joel Rifkin was found guilty of 9 counts of murder and sentenced to 203 years in jail. Yet it's believed he may have slain up to 17 victims during his 4-year reign of terror in New York. If it wasn't for one error in 1993, Rifkin may never have been caught. When the police attempted to pull him over for a missing rear license plate, Rifkin panicked and sped off with the cops in hot pursuit.
He just kept driving, and that's when I initiated the pursuit.
However, after over 20 minutes of reckless driving, the serial killer crashed his truck into a pole, allowing the officers to arrest him. Yet, as they approached the truck, there was a strong odor.
That's when I noticed stench.
When the cops looked under a sheet, they discovered one of Rifkin's victims. False license plate, Peter Sutcliffe. Between 1975 and 1980, the north of England was in a state of fear. A criminal known as the Yorkshire Ripper had taken the lives of 13 people, a figure that was suspected to be much higher later, and badly injured several others. Yet the police had no leads. In 1981, Peter Sutcliffe was arrested after the police noticed him in a car with an escort, and while he indeed had a license plate, it was a false one.
And discovered that the number plates did not tally with the vehicle. That rang alarm bells.
The cops quickly realized Sutcliffe matched the Yorkshire Ripper's description. One officer discovered weapons dumped where Sutcliffe was arrested, and a knife hidden in the toilet at the police station. After intense interviewing, Sutcliffe confessed.
Sutcliffe knew it was caught, and it was then he said, "I know what you're leading up to. It's me, I'm the Ripper."
He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years, which was later changed to a whole life tariff. Sutcliffe passed away in jail in 2020.
The serial killer, Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, has died in hospital at the age of 74.
Scratch marks, Earl Nelson. After sustaining a head injury as a child, Earl Nelson, aka the Dark Strangler or the Gorilla Man, began showcasing more and more erratic behavior. Eventually, it led to him becoming one of the US's most prolific serial killers. In just over a year, Nelson took the lives of up to 29 people throughout many states, including Washington, California, Oregon, and Missouri, and eventually ended up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. After more slayings, a search was underway for someone matching Nelson's description. With all this going on, he visited a barber. However, the worker noticed blood and scratch marks on Nelson, and they told the cops. Eventually, Nelson was discovered and arrested. In 1928, Nelson was executed for his crimes. Public indecency, Arthur Shawcross. In 1987, Arthur Shawcross, later known as the Genesee River Killer, was released from jail for taking the lives of 2 children. By the following year, he began terrorizing citizens in Rochester, New York. Shawcross took the lives of around 12 people until 1990. At that time, the police had discovered one of his victims, and a helicopter was checking out the area in the belief the killer would return to the scene. They spotted Shawcross on a nearby bridge, seemingly relieving himself in one form or another.
As the helicopter flew by, he closed the passenger door.
After running his vehicle license plate and discovering his morbid history, the cops arrested Shawcross, who admitted his guilt. He was sentenced to 250 years in jail before passing away in 2008.
I know, something inside me is weird.
Forged will, Harold Shipman. After the Shipman inquiry concluded in 2005, it was discovered that Harold Shipman might be one of the most prolific killers in history, with upwards of 250 victims. Later known as Dr. Death, Shipman was a general practitioner around Manchester, England. He befriended older patients, getting them to leave money to him in their wills, then giving them fatal amounts of morphine. But when solicitor Angela Woodruff was told that her mother's will had left everything to Shipman, she got suspicious.
She was absolutely astonished because if you look at the actual will, it's so amateur.
An investigation led to the police realizing the doctor's typewriter was used to write the will, as well as his fingerprint being on the letter.
And that in an interview he suggested that Mrs. Grundy used to borrow the typewriter.
In 2000, Shipman received life imprisonment before taking his own life in 2004.
It would have been Harold Shipman's 58th birthday tomorrow. The former GP thought responsible for more than 200 murders.
Plumbing issues. Dennis Nielsen. Between 1978 and 1983, Dennis Nielsen lured up to 15 victims to his residences in London, England, taking their lives and then living with the remains for a while. But by 1983, a plumber was examining a drain pipe that various residents had complained about. The worker found a strange substance coating them.
He discovered that what was blocking the toilets was actually human flesh.
After an investigation, it was discovered to be human remains, and it led to Nielsen.
On the 9th of February, blocked drains would lead to his discovery and arrest.
When the police got there and searched the property, they found more remains scattered about. Nielsen had disposed of evidence either by a bonfire or flushing it in the toilet, leading to his downfall. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for 6 murders and 1 attempt. In 2018, Nielsen passed away in jail.
Nielsen was totally matter-of-fact, quite cold. There was no remorse. There was no indication of any remorse.
Erratic driving, Randy Kraft. In 1983, California Highway Patrol officers noticed a car driving erratically on the freeway. Understandably suspecting this was a DUI, they pulled the car over.
California Highway Patrol pulled over Randy Kraft for driving erratically.
As one cop spoke to the driver outside the vehicle to give him a sobriety test, the other checked the passenger, who remained sitting. However, they discovered he was tied up and wasn't alive. By pure happenstance, these officers uncovered the identity of the notorious scorecard killer, Randy Kraft. By 1989, Kraft was found guilty of taking the lives of 16 men, receiving an execution sentence. However, it's speculated he might have slain up to 67 people. At the time of writing, Kraft was still on death row.
And that's where he is still, 73 years old, at the infamous San Quentin prison in San Francisco.
Stolen car, Ted Bundy. In early 1978, Florida was experiencing a series of brutal attacks and slayings within a short amount of time. And it all ended when Officer David Lee realized a car that had been reported stolen was in front of him.
A man was spotted in his VW Bug, acting suspiciously.
While the thief attempted to escape by running away, Lee tackled and arrested him. It was soon discovered Lee had brought Ted Bundy to justice, who had escaped custody multiple times and committed horrific crimes.
Ted Bundy was in custody again, but his capture would spell just the beginning of an extraordinary 11-year circus.
After a series of trials for his crimes, Bundy was sentenced to capital punishment. While he confessed to killing 30 people and was confirmed to have taken 20 lives, there's speculation the true number could be much, much higher. In 1989, Bundy's sentence was carried out.
While he confessed to many crimes, investigators say he recanted many statements and couldn't be trusted to tell the truth.
Floppy disk, Dennis Rader. Between 1974 and 1991, several people perished around Kansas at the hands of BTK, a self-given nickname by the monster who taunted the media and police in his messages. But then he vanished. Yet, by 2004, BTK began sending detailed letters to the newspaper The Wichita Eagle. Looking to receive more of his writings, the police convinced BTK that he couldn't be traced if he sent a floppy disk containing the documents. However, he could, and he fell for the bait. Specialists discovered evidence on the disk linking it to a church and its council president, Dennis Rader. In 2005, Rader pled guilty to 10 counts of murder and was sentenced to 175 years in jail. Which mistake do you think was the dumbest?
Cliff, go and get the police.
Sex workers have long been among the most vulnerable targets, and our next video exposes a tragic pattern: serial killers who specifically targeted them.
Some of these victims he dated multiple times before he killed them.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're discussing some of the horrific true crime cases where the victims were singled out due to their working in the sex trade.
These people were not conscious, they weren't mobile, they weren't able to protect themselves, and they were engaging in sexual acts against their will.
The New Bedford Highway Killer.
Boyle says some detectives wondered if the killer intentionally dumped the bodies outside New Bedford city limits so New Bedford police wouldn't have jurisdiction over the crimes.
Criminologists and other experts have come up with varying hypotheses regarding exactly why those in the sex trade are often targeted by serial killers. Some claim the demonization of this oldest profession is one reason, while others point to either laissez-faire police procedure or the victim's ease of access and anonymity. No one at the time of this writing has been brought to justice for the highway killings that shocked areas near New Bedford, Massachusetts back in the late 80s.
You had the remains of woman after woman after woman found along the two highways, similar situations, similar backgrounds.
10 official victims have been attributed to the New Bedford Highway Killer, women who all either worked in the sex industry or battled substance use disorder.
There have been other suspects, but no arrests.
I'm very, very surprised that this case has not been solved.
The Butcher Baker.
The interrogation room was ready for him. The goal was to keep him off balance, hoping to elicit a confession and avoid a lengthy legal case.
It's unclear as to why so many news outlets and members of the media choose to attach monikers such as the Butcher Baker to killers like Robert Hansen. The man's otherwise unassuming name doesn't exactly bring to mind the shocking brutality of his crimes. Yet Hansen was allegedly responsible for attacking at least 17 women in the area of Anchorage, Alaska during a 10-plus year rampage.
I was watching national news, and there was Bob Hansen. And I thought, what the hell is Bob Hansen doing on national news? And I turned it up, and it said, this is the greatest mass murder in the history of Alaska.
Many of his victims were involved in sex work. His nickname of the Butcher Baker was connected to a family confectionery business, but Hansen's methods of execution were anything but sweet. He would often drag out the process, taking his victims to remote locations before releasing them into the wild, where they would be hunted by Hansen.
I know what you do to those girls, and I'm gonna prove it.
It's gonna be hard, Sergeant. I heard you were leaving.
Dr. No. There should be no confusing the very real-life case of this notorious Ohio serial killer to the fictional James Bond villain of the same name.
I only gratify your curiosity because you're the one man I've met capable of appreciating what I've done and keeping it to himself.
There's also some additional confusion with regards to whether or not Samuel Legg's 2019 arrest on unrelated murder charges might just connect the latter to Ohio's unsolved Dr. No murders from the 1980s. These killings focused upon runaways, hitchhikers, and truck stop sex workers, professionals that would then be abducted and strangled off-site. Legg was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial in 2023, and it remains to be seen whether or not any closure will be brought to these cold cases. The Sunset Strip Killers.
Detectives later found out that Bundy would go from trying to blow the whistle on Clark to the other extreme, as she began to involve herself in Clark's twisted pastime.
The grisly details that can be taken away from the Sunset Strip murder read like something out of a horror or exploitation movie. Doug Clark and his lover Carol Mary Bundy let their own sexual fantasies evolve into real-world thrill killings. These were usually at the expense of sex workers, whose remains would often be defiled and debased by both Clark and Bundy.
He sees all women as sex workers. These were just 2 teenage girls, and both of them ended up dying.
Moreover, some of the victims had their heads removed and stored by the couple in their home. They even applied makeup to the head of one victim, Exie Wilson, before bringing it home as a part of the pair's sick and twisted crimes.
You know anything about rigor mortis? Anybody in the room, show of hands. Anybody heard of rigor mortis? A jaw locked like this, frozen, supposedly?
David Smith. It was the Criminal Justice Act of 2003 that allowed British killer David Smith to be retried in 2023 for the 1993 murder of a sex worker named Sarah Crump. This second time proved to be the charm with regards to achieving a guilty verdict, but it tragically was not the only time Smith would be convicted of killing other workers in this industry. Smith was found guilty in 1999 for a similarly brutal and brazen murder, specifically that of Amanda Walker. He's currently incarcerated and serving a life sentence, although the possibility of parole does come up after 27 years have been served. The Yorkshire Ripper.
The similarities were there. There was no doubt this time that we had a serial killer on the patch.
He was born Peter Sutcliffe, but is perhaps better known by his moniker of the Yorkshire Ripper. This was a prolific British serial killer who targeted women and young girls. Some, but not all of his victims worked in the sex trade, and Sutcliffe was allegedly said to have, quote, heard voices that led him to commit these crimes.
We always went 2, 3 of you together. We knew we could be the next victim as easily as anyone else.
The Yorkshire Ripper prowled both Manchester and West Yorkshire during the mid and late 1970s, terrorizing the surrounding area for over 5 years. Sutcliffe was violent, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous, but he wasn't unstoppable. The Yorkshire Ripper was caught in 1981 and sentenced to life imprisonment with 20 concurrent sentences, eventually dying in custody on November 13, 2020.
What was really sad about Yvonne Pearson, and I think in a way underlines the sad lives that these women were living, was that her body wasn't found for several months after he killed her.
The Grim Sleeper.
And they said, can you describe him? He was a little short guy, black. He looked like a guy who just came out of Circuit City. He had a polo shirt and some khakis on.
It's unusual for the activities of a serial killer such as Lonnie Franklin to be so sparse and spread out over time. Yet the 14-year gap during which he was inactive led the press to dub Franklin the Grim Sleeper. Including that gap, his spree stretched from 1981 to 2007. A Los Angeles police investigation into early 80s sex worker slayings would eventually arrive at Franklin as a suspect.
Franklin was arrested last summer after DNA evidence allegedly tied him to 10 murders dating back 25 years, most of them black women from South Central LA.
He was accused of being responsible for some, but not all of the murders. Franklin was convicted on all counts, and the Grim Sleeper was officially sentenced to death. However, his lifeless body would be found in a cell before the sentence could be carried out. The cause of death remains unreleased.
All of these people have been suffering and will continue to suffer, but hopefully, as many of them said, they feel they're going to receive some peace, and I hope that you are able to leave here with some peace today.
The Green River Killer.
You find bodies dumped in this context, in this environment of a lot of extraneous material. What's evidence and what's not?
He was one of the most prolific serial murderers in United States history. The Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, was also perhaps one of the most unrepentant of his kind, an opportunist that preyed upon those in states of desperation and destitution. Ridgway possessed an obsession with sex workers that vacillated between disgust for their profession and a lust for their services. Yet the Green River Killer also allegedly held fast to his religious beliefs, resulting in an internal battle that seemed to rage constantly within him.
Green River investigators say Gary Leon Ridgway has long been at the top of their suspect list.
We ended our interview, allowed the attorneys to go in and interview him.
Ridgway's methodology was anything but swift, killing runaways and hitchhikers in a manner that helped draft the Green River Killer into the annals of sick serial killer infamy.
The prostitutes were the easiest. I went from having sex with them to just plain killing them. The sight of them, for me, was like candy in a dish.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Dahmer placed the blame for the murders on his atheistic beliefs and the theory of evolution.
He said, if it all happens naturalistically,
What's the need for a God? Can't I set my own rule?
The victims of Jeffrey Dahmer all retained a certain body type that seemed to attract the Milwaukee-based serial killer. Some of Dahmer's victims also worked in the sex industry, although this wasn't specifically what drew the killer to stalk his prey. The backstories of Dahmer's victims did allegedly influence the police investigation, however, a combination of ethnicity, sexuality, and occupation that resulted in a lot of clues slipping through the cracks.
After this all came out, several people in the bar said, I remember him. I remember. Well, of course we all did. Milwaukee's only this big.
Jeffrey Dahmer was given no less than 16 life sentences for his actions, but the killer barely served 3 years before he was murdered by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, on November 28, 1994.
Sir, we're under arrest for the attempted murder. The man out there, you have the right to remain silent.
Jack the Ripper.
It was here, in the early hours of the 30th of September, that the body of a woman would be found. Her name was Elizabeth Stride.
The complete lack of solid answers continues to haunt historians who have studied the case of Jack the Ripper. This killer's true identity might not ever be known, but what is known is that he seemed to actively seek out victims from the sex trade. Jack the Ripper's methodology was clinically precise, but callous and deranged. He also sent taunting letters to investigators, missives with a perverse sense of pride about the Ripper's brutality.
Communicating with the public is not an unknown phenomenon with serial killers because it makes them feel superior.
This ghost of eternal evil unfortunately lives on within the minds of many true crime enthusiasts. But perhaps we should focus more on those who were victimized by Jack the Ripper, rather than mythologizing a ruthless killer.
6 men died to bring it here from Egypt.
For our final video, we're going to reveal 30 terrifying serial killers who are not behind bars because they are free.
Mary Beth Tinning's case gained national attention 30 years ago. She'll be released from prison later this month.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at famous serial killers who are currently not locked up in prison. We'll be covering cases of convicts being released from jail and those who haven't been caught yet.
They come back to our community, they live next to us, they shop in the Krogers.
The Missouri River Killer. In 1982, the body of Annette Parker was found in the Missouri River. This would spark a series of murders, as women and girls residing in Kansas City, Missouri were discovered in or near the river. Officially, between 1982 and 1994, there were 7 victims of the Missouri River Killer who shared a very similar grisly MO. However, there is speculation there could be more. In 1996, Gregory Breeden was charged as the serial killer. Yet during that time, further bodies were discovered. However, the police deemed the cases unconnected to the Missouri River Killer. With a lack of evidence, Breeden's case was dropped. He spent the rest of his life denying the allegations until his passing in 2014.
Breeden died of natural causes. Amy says her grandmother was convinced Breeden was the killer.
Warren Harris. In 1977, in the space of 2 months, 5 men were slain in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. Most of the victims were known to be gay, and most were found inside their own homes. A week after the last victim, a 16-year-old Harris was arrested for an attempted violent robbery. During the interrogation, he brought up his hatred of the gay community and confessed to 4 of the murders. In 1977, Harris was found guilty of 3 of the murders. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the chance of pardon or parole. In 2021, his sentence was changed to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. This opened it up for Harris to be released in 2024.
Harris, now 63, will be under state parole supervision for the rest of his life.
The Redhead Murders. From 1984 to 1985, the bodies of 5 females were found alongside roads in various U.S. states. Each victim had reddish hair.
The deaths in Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Pennsylvania. The killer never caught.
Officially, they are all victims of the Redhead Murderer. However, there's speculation that between 1978 and 1992, there could be over 14 victims. In 1985, trucker Jerry Leon Johns was arrested for attempting to kill a red-headed woman. His connection to the serial killings was dismissed, but he was sentenced for attempted murder. In 2016, Johns' DNA was tied to one of the victims of the Redhead murders.
An autopsy revealed the Campbell County victim had been strangled to death by Johns, who died in custody in 2015.
However, he passed away in 2015. This made his connection difficult to prove, leaving the culprit's identity still a mystery. Harnoko Diwantoro. In the late 80s, Diwantoro arrived in the U.S. on a student visa from Indonesia. However, from 1991 to 1992, he began taking lives for revenge when his victims pulled out of business deals. Fearing getting caught, Diwantoro placed the bodies in a storage unit before going back to Indonesia. Yet when the unit was opened, the authorities in Indonesia arrested Diwantoro in 1995. He confessed to 2 of the murders but claimed his brother committed one of them. The cops didn't buy it and charged him for all 3. With U.S. police flying into Indonesia to provide evidence, in 1997, Diwantoro was sentenced to death. However, in 2019, after his sentence was changed to life imprisonment, then Indonesian President Joko Widodo pardoned Diwantoro, resulting in his release. The Skid Row Stabber. From 1978 to 1979, the unhoused community in the Skid Row neighborhood of Los Angeles, California was in a state of fear as 11 people were murdered, seemingly by the same culprit.
Another body was found today in the Skid Row section of Los Angeles.
In 1978, Bobby Joe Maxwell was arrested after holding a knife over an unhoused person. This led the police to believe Maxwell was responsible and charged him for the killings.
After the arrest, he wouldn't talk. He wouldn't say a word.
In 1984, with testimony from Maxwell's cellmate claiming he admitted to the murders, he was sentenced to life without parole.
Of all the murders, Maxwell was only found guilty of the murders of Frank Garcia and David Jones.
After years of appeals against false testimony, in 2010, Maxwell's sentence was overturned. However, in 2017, he fell into a coma from a heart attack. While he was acquitted in 2018 at the retrial, Maxwell never woke up and passed away in 2019. Antonio Angles and Miguel Ricard. In 1992, teenage girls Desiree Hernandez, Miriam Garcia, and Antonio Gomez got a ride at a gas station to go to a nightclub. This was the last time they were seen alive. Collectively known as the Alcázar Girls due to all living in the Spanish municipality, in 1993, their bodies were found after heavy rain disturbed their improvised grave. When the police arrived, they found Ricard's glove and a letter for his brother, leading to his arrest. He admitted to committing the crime with Angles. However, the cops were unable to find him. Angles' last sighting was on a container ship to Ireland. He's still wanted by Interpol. Ricard was sentenced to 170 years, with the maximum in jail being 30. He was released in 2013. El Juguetero. In 2019, in the Mexican city of Culiacan, Sinaloa, a serial killer vigilante began prowling the streets. The unidentified murderer took action against those who stole cars, subjecting them to violent abuse before taking their lives. They then left the bodies out to be discovered, with the killer's signature of toy cars found on top of them. This led to the killer being dubbed El Juguetero, meaning the toy maker, or El Asesino del Carrito, meaning the toy car killer. One victim was recorded stealing a vehicle on CCTV only 12 hours before he was killed. In 2023, another body was found with toy cars placed on him, but it's unsure if this is connected to El Juguetero. Catherine Wood. While working at the Alpine Manor nursing home in Walker, Michigan, Catherine Wood and Gwendolyn Graham fell in love.
I thought that Gwen was the first person to ever love me.
Soon, their romance turned deadly. In 1987, as some form of unsettling love pact, the duo smothered 5 patients to death. After Wood confessed the crimes to her ex-husband, he went to the police. Wood made a plea bargain, claiming she was a lookout while Graham did the murders, which she denied and claimed Wood was the instigator.
Wood cooperated with police, telling them that Graham suffocated the women with washcloths, while she was the lookout.
In 1989, Graham was sentenced to 5 life sentences. Wood received 20 to 40 years. While being eligible for parole since 2005, it was rejected each time. But that changed in 2020 when Wood was released, despite Graham and the victim's family's pleas to keep her locked up.
I would certainly think that they're going to keep an eye on her.
The West Mesa Bone Collector. In 2009, a woman was walking her dog in the West Mesa Desert in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when the animal found a human bone. Investigators soon excavated the site, finding a mass grave containing 11 women and girls.
A call to police led to the gruesome discovery of the remains of 11 women.
The victims had gone missing between 2003 and 2004. There are possibly other victims, as several additional women and girls with similar backgrounds had also gone missing in the area between 2001 and 2006. In 2010, police offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the culprit. While there have been several possible perpetrators linked to the case over the years, the killer is still unknown.
I wouldn't say that we're any closer, unfortunately.
Nathaniel Cook.
40 years ago, darkness descended over the streets of Toledo.
With his brother Anthony in jail for life for murder, Nathaniel wanted to move on with his life. But when he was arrested for a minor offense, his DNA was linked to a murder in 1998. In 2000, Anthony and Daniel agreed to a plea bargain. They confessed to having taken several lives together in and around Toledo, Ohio from 1980 to 1981. Anthony pleaded guilty to 9 slayings, while Nathaniel confirmed 1 and was complicit in 2 others.
The slimy creatures of the earth that took my most precious gift from God, they need flushed down the gutter. That would even be too mild.
Due to the deal, Anthony had 1 life sentence added on, and Nathaniel received 75 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. While Anthony has had his parole rejected multiple times, Nathaniel's was granted, and he was released in 2018.
Other terms of his release include being under community control for 5 years and GPS monitoring for a year.
The Little Rock Slasher.
Stabbings happened over a 9-month period, and police tell us it's all connected to one man.
Police in Arkansas believe that there is an active serial killer on the loose, and he goes by a number of names like the River City Ripper and the Little Rock Slasher. The city saw a rash of stabbings between August 2020 and April 2021, with 4 people being stabbed at random while walking alone at night. 3 of the victims died. The 4th survived her attack and told police that she was accosted by a black man who was tall, young, and slender. Reward of $20,000 has been established for the man's capture, but nothing has come to fruition, and an investigation is currently ongoing.
There is a $20,000 reward offered by the Little Rock Police Department that leads to an arrest.
Charles Sabrage.
And as you may know, Americans do not prosper in this part of the world.
Often, life in prison doesn't actually mean life in prison. Infamous for stalking Asia's hippie trail during the 70s, Sabrage is suspected of murdering between 12 and 30 people, primarily young Western tourists. He avoided detection for many years, earning the moniker the Serpent. However, Sabrage was finally caught and jailed in 1976, and he was in and out of prison until 2022. In December of that year, the Supreme Court of Nepal ordered his release after serving 19 years of a life term. He was allegedly released due to old age, being 78 at the time. Sabrage was deported back to France, where he is currently planning some films and hoping to sue those who imprisoned him.
I'm fed up of all the allegations, and so I decide that I'm going to put forward my facts and let the people decide.
Sammy Gravano.
Sammy the Bull is a serial murderer. He's a psychopath and a sociopath.
The only reason Sammy the Bull doesn't meet your standard definition of a serial killer is because he was in the mob. A high-ranking member of the Gambino crime family, Gravano was involved in at least 19 murders throughout his time in the mafia. Among his victims were his own brother-in-law, his best friend Louis Melito, and the head of the Gambino crime family, Paul Castellano. His crime spree finally came to an end in 1991 when he decided to turn state's evidence and testify against famous mobster John Gotti. In exchange for his information, Gravano was only given 5 years in prison. He was later busted on a drug trafficking charge, but was released in 2017, and now, of all things, runs a YouTube channel.
When we first started walking around, talking to people after the Castellano hit, I was armed all the time.
The Freeway Phantom.
I will admit the others when you catch me, if you can.
Active in the Washington, D.C. area in the early 1970s, the Freeway Phantom targeted young African-American girls and was known to have killed 6 individuals. Perhaps his most famous victim was Brenda Crockett, a young girl who was forced to call her own family after being abducted, likely to feed them inaccurate information and throw off the investigation. Despite a number of suspects, the Freeway Phantom remains unidentified, with no strong leads pointing towards his current whereabouts or status. But given that these murders occurred in the early 70s, it's entirely possible that he is still alive.
I would want him to come out and say,
I did it.
The doodler.
Then there's also this contention that 5, maybe 6 victims is actually really undercutting the true number. Some think it's as many as 14 victims. Why is that?
A unique killer, the doodler earned his nickname because he often sketched his victims prior to killing them. In the mid-70s, the doodler would meet his victims at gay nightclubs, take them to a private location, sketch them, then fatally stab them. It's believed that he killed between 6 and 16 people in this manner. Amazingly, 3 victims survived. However, no convictions were made due to the victims' unwillingness to testify in court, as they did not wish to publicly out themselves as gay. As it is, the doodler has remained unnamed. He was described as being in his early 20s, so provided he's still alive, he would currently be in his early 70s.
A new updated sketch was released Tuesday, and the reward has been increased to $250,000 for information leading to the killer.
David McGreevy.
And I'm looking at it, there's a huge amount of emotion based around this, and you can see for obvious reasons why the emotions are there. The crime that was committed was an horrendous crime.
Also known as the Monster of Worcester, David McGreevy committed one of Britain's most shocking crimes in 1973. On the night of April 13th, McGreevy was minding the 3 children of his friend Clive Ralph. But when Clive and his wife Elsie returned home, David was gone, and so were their children. Upon a further search of the area, investigators found the bodies of the 3 in a neighbor's yard. McGreevy served over 4 decades in prison before being controversially released on parole in 2018, the motive being that he had, quote, changed considerably while inside.
And the parole board this time have decided that his risk is low enough that he could be trusted to serve the rest of his life sentence outside of prison.
Arnfinn Nesset.
So I checked in with Beth. She's still sleeping. Jack's been pushing on his call button, but I've got it.
God.
So don't. What?
There's insulin in her system.
This unassuming man once seemed like a stand-up citizen. After finishing school, Nesset quickly became head nurse at a Norwegian nursing home. When the number of deaths in the facility became suspiciously high, however, the police got involved. It's suspected that Nesset may have been responsible for up to 138 deaths, but he only admitted to 27 when interrogated. In 1983, he was found guilty of murdering 22 patients and sentenced to 21 years in prison, which was Norway's longest possible sentence at that time. After just 12 years in prison, he was released on good behavior and is now walking the streets under a pseudonym.
Who's Kelly Anderson?
Is there another victim? Another double medication error?
Mitchell Johnson.
We was going outside to the back of the building, and then all of a sudden we started hearing this big old loud sounds.
Nowadays, it seems as if there's a violent shooting every month. But this wasn't the case in 1998 when middle school students Mitchell Johnson and Andrew Golden shocked the nation. On March 24, 1998, Johnson and Golden wounded 10 people and killed 5 after pulling the fire alarm in a middle school in Arkansas. They then shot at the students and teachers who were evacuating the school. They were found guilty of 5 counts of murder and imprisoned until they reached 21, which was the maximum under Arkansas law. After serving 7 and 9 years respectively, the 2 were released. Johnson remains free, while Golden died in a car accident in 2019.
A 33-year-old Drew Grant died in a head-on collision 21 years after he and a friend killed 5 people at an Arkansas middle school.
The Monster of Florence.
That is the Duomo seen from the Belvedere. You know Florence?
Between 1968 and 1985, 16 people were killed in 8 double homicides inside the greater Florence area. The victims were couples who had ventured into remote areas to become intimate. Despite the first murder occurring in 1968, it wasn't until 1981 that the police realized they were connected, and an investigation led them to 2 men, Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti. These men were allegedly part of a larger gang of murderers, but they were only convicted on 4 of the 8 double homicides. Furthermore, their supposed guilt has been questioned and doubted by many legal experts. The other members of the supposed gang, including the ringleader, have never been caught. That is, if it's even a gang in the first place.
I have no plans to call on you, Clarice. The world's more interesting with you in it. So you take care now to extend me the same courtesy.
Wolfgang Abel and Marco Furlan.
Cominciamo con Wolfgang Abel. Buonasera, signor Abel. Abel è...
Buonasera.
Buonasera.
Between 1977 and 84, Abel and Furlan went on a killing spree, targeting unhoused people, gay people, sex workers, those with substance use disorder, and priests they deemed, quote, sinful. At each crime scene was a pamphlet with Nazi images declaring that the victims were killed for being, quote, subhuman. After an initial 30-year sentence, both men were released as a result of an appeal process, during which time Furlan fled the country. After his recapture, the two were subsequently sentenced to 27 years. Furlan was released in 2009 and Abel in 2013. Louis Francois.
I've read a lot of newspaper articles where they've called me a serial killer, a mass murderer. I don't agree with that.
Also known as the apartheid killer, Louis Francois was a security guard who was in the employ of businesses in South Africa throughout the mid-1980s. He is suspected to have shot over 100 people and killed 39 while working as a guard. While on duty, he would approach businesses that had a tripped silent alarm and shoot the alleged burglars, almost exclusively people of color. He claims that his killings were not racially motivated, and he likes to refer to himself as a, quote, crime fighter. Regardless of what he calls himself, he was given 20 years in prison for 7 counts of murder and was released after 12 years served.
Some people told me I must get out of the business while I can. What for? I haven't done anything wrong.
Mary Beth Tinning. Tragedy seemed to follow Tinning wherever she lived in New York State. Starting in 1971, she would lose her children one after another over the course of 14 years.
Every one of her 9 children had died suddenly and without warning.
This led to the belief that something genetic was causing the early deaths. However, in 1981, that theory changed when her adopted child fell down the stairs. When another biological child perished in 1985, government officials descended on Tinning and her husband Joseph.
Police eventually came back again to the house on Michigan Avenue, and this time they took the 42-year-old woman in for questioning.
During the interrogation, she signed a document that admitted to her taking 3 lives, which she later claimed was under duress. In 1987, Tinning was found guilty of 1 count of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years to life, but in 2018, Tinning was released on parole.
Mary Beth Tinning soon will be free.
Collins Jumaisi Kalusha. In 2024, desperate to find their missing relative, a family member contacted a diver to search a quarry near a police station in Nairobi, Kenya after having a dream about the location. When they did so, they discovered the remains of 10 people. During the investigation, Collins Jumaisi Kalusha was interrogated. He seemingly confessed to taking 42 lives since 2022, including his own wife's. Kalusha later claimed the confession was taken during abuse from officers. However, while in jail, Kalusha broke out along with 12 other prisoners who were arrested for alleged illegal immigration.
The National Police Service has already launched a manhunt for the 13 suspects.
Several officers believed to have helped in the breakout were arrested. So far, even with a cash reward issued by the police, Kalusha has remained free.
DCI officials are urging anyone with information on Jumaisi whereabouts to come forward.
The Smiley Face Gang.
They are hundreds of young men from all across the country, their deaths labeled as accidental drownings. Now, these retired detectives say it's murder.
If you believe retired NYPD detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, then there are a number of unsolved murders in the American Midwest. They theorize that one or more serial killers was active in the general area from the late 90s to the 2010s, killing upwards of 45 individuals. According to local law enforcement agencies and the FBI, these deaths were attributed to alcohol-related drownings, but Gannon and Duarte are convinced that they are connected. Their hypothesis is backed by criminal justice professor Dr. Lee Gilbertson, who publicly endorsed the theory on Larry King Live back in 2009. If their assumptions are correct, then not one person has been arrested in connection to the alleged killings.
There's a well-structured, organized group with cells spread out in major cities across the United States.
Mika Muranen. The role of the military in any country should be to keep the nation and its citizens safe. In 1994, however, military conscript Mika Muranen brought the war home to Kotka, Finland. Dressed in uniform, he took a crossbow from his house and shot 2 of his neighbors. The next day, using an assault rifle he had stolen from his military base, he shot a postal carrier before fleeing into the woods while shooting at random houses. After he was captured, he was sentenced to life in prison. However, after 4 previous attempts, he was granted parole in September 2014. Charlene Gallego.
In the late 70s,
a sadistic husband and wife team stalked the American West.
Charlene Gallego, along with her husband Gerald, were serial killers who killed 10 people, the majority of whom were teenagers, in the American West between 1978 and 1980. They would abduct people off the streets and assault and murder them, earning themselves the moniker of the love slave killers. After being captured, Charlene was offered a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Gerald, and she was subsequently sentenced to 16 years and 8 months in prison. While Gerald eventually died in prison while awaiting execution, Charlene was freed in July of 1997.
Well, I don't think Charlene was a born killer at all. I think Charlene got involved in this through her association with Gerald.
Alexander Rubel. From September 1997 to June 1998, Rubel, who was then a teenager, murdered 6 to 8 people while high on gasoline vapors. His first victim, a neighbor with disabilities, was reportedly murdered simply because Rubel had an uncontrollable urge to kill someone. Having acquired a taste for murder, Rubel proceeded to kill several more people. Other murders of his include slitting the throat of a young girl and attacking a random passerby with an axe after asking for money. He was sentenced to 8 years, the maximum allowed for a minor, and now allegedly lives in Ukraine. The Highway of Tears killer.
I remember once counting the number of side roads that a killer could drive off to dispose of a body in an hour, and there were, 100 or more.
This is the name for a long stretch of road on British Columbia's Highway 16, which has seen many disappearances and murders of local Indigenous women. The exact number of victims remains unknown, but some estimates place it above 80. Even worse, these attacks have been going on unimpeded since 1970. A number of arrests have been made, but most of the murders remain unsolved. Unfortunately, there are many factors going into the high number of missing women, including Highway 16's remote location and the prevalence of hitchhiking that occurs in the area owing to systemic poverty and a lack of public transportation.
I did learn some things today. I think it went well.
What'd you learn?
I don't want to say. But I have. I've learned some things which in the future are going to help me.
It could be that Ray will never figure out what happened here, but his investigations are also a reminder. There are hundreds of cases of missing or murdered Indigenous women across the country that need to be solved.
Karla Homolka.
Can I talk to you for a second?
No, you can't.
Since September, Homolka has been a regular fixture at Greaves Adventist Academy, a private Christian school.
Among Canada's most notorious serial killers, Karla Homolka and her husband Paul Bernardo were responsible for assaulting and murdering 3 women, including Homolka's sister Tammy, who they drugged and assaulted. They then kidnapped 2 more minors off the street and did the same to them as well. When captured, Homolka struck a plea deal to testify against Bernardo, claiming a diminished role in the murders. However, this was later found to be a lie. She was sentenced to 12 years and was released in 2005. Recently, she caused an uproar for volunteering at her daughter's elementary school in Quebec.
City News has learned Karla Homolka has been in the classroom and on a field trip. Dominique Fazioli tells us why the school didn't do a background check.
The Lines Angels of Death. Throughout the 1980s, the Lines Angels of Death were employed as nurses' aides in Austria. After one of the angels killed a patient with a morphine overdose, she discovered her lust for power and talked her friends into joining her foray into murder. Over the years, they allegedly killed upwards of 200 patients by holding their noses and filling their mouths with water until they drowned. After being caught discussing their latest kill in a bar, they confessed to 49 of the murders. Their sentences ranged from 15 years to life, but as of 2008, all have been released and are walking free. Pedro Lopez.
Amenaza de muerte que si lo delataba, que él me mataba. Pero Jorge Patiño eres tú mismo, decía. No, padre, yo soy Pedro Alonso López para servirle.
While in prison, Lopez underwent a psychological evaluation. It was determined that he was a sociopath, that he suffered from an antisocial personality disorder.
Lopez was a mass murderer who says he assaulted and killed up to 300 girls throughout Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador in the late 70s. He claimed to have killed around 3 a week, and he confessed to murdering over 300. He was found guilty on 110 counts of murder and was sentenced to 16 years in prison, which was Ecuador's highest form of punishment. After later being held in a mental health facility, he was released on bail in 1998 and disappeared. While he could have been recaptured, he could also be free or even dead. No one really knows. And isn't that even more terrifying?
That was the last time anyone reported seeing Pedro Alonso Lopez. His mother believes he has managed to avoid being killed by the families of his victims.
Up until now, I haven't felt it. When someone dies, you feel a shock, and I haven't felt anything. I believe in what our Lord says. When a person dies, it's revealed to others. So there was nothing revealed to me.
The Zodiac Killer.
When a man is, if you don't mind using the word sick, you can't hold this against them. But the real concern that I have is that he doesn't do this again. I'd like to see some people save this experience.
And here we come to a legendary serial killer who has commanded America's attention for decades. The Zodiac has remained an enduring figure of pop culture since his crime spree in the late 60s that left at least 5 people dead. The case has many famous aspects, including Zodiac's correspondence with the media and the elusive cryptograms that he published through the local newspapers. And of course, there's one other aspect that has allowed the story to remain so popular. He was never caught. Eyewitnesses have given wildly different ages for the Zodiac, but many have placed him in his 30s. So while he would be very old, it's entirely possible that the Zodiac is still alive and out there somewhere.
Last time I saw this face was July 4th. 1969. I am very sure that's the man who shot me.
All right, well, that's going to do it for yet another look at serial killers. Thanks for watching. I've been Matt from Watch Mojo, and I'll see you next time.